It was a crisp Saturday evening in Manhattan when Lawrence Bennett stood outside the Sterling Room, one of the city's most prestigious restaurants. The golden light spilling from the tall windows cast long shadows on the sidewalk, and the sound of soft jazz drifted through the heavy oak doors. Lawrence adjusted the collar of his worn but clean button-down shirt and took a deep breath. He had been looking forward to this evening for 2 weeks. At 65 years old, Lawrence carried himself with a quiet dignity that came from a lifetime of discipline and purpose. His salt and pepper hair was neatly trimmed, and his dark eyes held a depth that spoke of both wisdom and sorrow. In his hand, he carried a simple canvas bag, the kind you might pick up at any grocery store. To anyone passing by, he looked like just another elderly man, perhaps on his way home from running errands. But appearances, as we're about to discover, can be devastatingly deceiving. Lawrence had made this reservation 3 weeks ago, a small indulgence he allowed himself twice a year. The Sterling Room wasn't just any restaurant. It was the place where he and his late wife Eleanor had celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary just 2 years before she passed. Coming here was his way of keeping her memory alive, of feeling close to her again, even if just for an evening. As he reached for the brass door handle, Lawrence had no idea that the next hour would change not just his life, but spark a national conversation about dignity, respect, and the dangerous assumptions we make about people based on how they look. What happened next would expose an ugly truth that many would rather ignore, and it would all be captured on camera for the world to see. Lawrence pushed open the heavy door and stepped into the warmth of the restaurant. The interior was exactly as he remembered it. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, casting a soft glow over tables dressed in crisp white linens. The walls were adorned with tasteful artwork, and in the far corner, commanding attention like a jewel in a crown, sat a magnificent Steinway grand piano, its black lacquer surface gleaming under the lights. The hostess stand was positioned just inside the entrance, and behind it stood a young woman in her mid-20s, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She was reviewing the reservation book when Lawrence approached, and when she looked up, her professional smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. It was subtle, but Lawrence noticed. After 65 years of living as a black man in America, you learn to recognize that particular flicker in someone's eyes. "Good evening," Lawrence said warmly. "I have a reservation for 7 o'clock. Bennett. Lawrence Bennett." The hostess glanced down at her book, her finger tracing down the page. "Bennett," she repeated slowly, her tone suggesting she was having trouble locating the name. "Could you spell that for me? B-E-N-N-E-T-T?" Lawrence replied patiently. She continued to scan the page, though Lawrence could see his name clearly written there from where he stood. The hostess bit her lip, then looked up at him with an apologetic expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm seeing a Bennett here, but are you sure you have the right restaurant? The Sterling Room can be quite particular about their dress code." Lawrence looked down at his clothes. He wore dark slacks, freshly pressed, and a navy button-down shirt. It wasn't a suit and tie, certainly, but it was clean and presentable. "The reservation was made 3 weeks ago," he said, keeping his voice even, "and I was told business casual was acceptable for the main dining room." The hostess opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Emily, is there a problem here?" A woman in her early 40s approached the hostess stand with the confident stride of someone who knew she owned the room. Her name was Diane Crawford, and she was the restaurant's floor manager. Everything about her spoke of careful cultivation, her perfectly styled auburn hair, her designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and the way she looked at Lawrence as if he were something unpleasant she'd discovered on the bottom of her shoe. "I was just helping this gentleman," Emily said quietly, stepping aside as Diane moved in front of the hostess stand. Diane's eyes swept over Lawrence from head to toe, lingering on his canvas bag with barely concealed disdain. "Can I help you?" she asked, though her tone suggested that helping him was the last thing she wanted to do. "I have a 7 o'clock reservation," Lawrence repeated, maintaining his composure, even as he felt the familiar weight of judgment settling over the interaction. Bennett. Diane picked up the reservation book, made a show of examining it, then set it down with a decisive thump. "I'm afraid there's been some kind of mistake," she said, not looking at Lawrence as she spoke. "We're fully booked this evening, and even if we weren't. The Sterling Room maintains certain standards. We cater to a very particular clientele. I made this reservation 3 weeks ago." Lawrence said, his voice still calm, but with an edge of steel now. "I received a confirmation email. I can show it to you on my phone if you'd like." "That won't be necessary," Diane said crisply. "Sometimes our online system accepts reservations it shouldn't. I'm sure you understand. There are plenty of other establishments in the area that might be more suitable to your needs." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Around them, other diners were beginning to notice the exchange. A couple waiting to be seated glanced over curiously. A waiter paused in his path, sensing tension. Lawrence felt a familiar ache in his chest, the kind that comes when you're forced to confront casual cruelty disguised as policy. He'd faced this kind of thing before, of course. No black person in America reaches 65 without encountering it in various forms. But it never stopped hurting. It never stopped being exhausting. "I understand perfectly," Lawrence said quietly. "You're refusing to honor my reservation because you don't think I look like I belong here. You've made an assumption about who I am based on my appearance, and you've decided that I'm not good enough for your establishment." Diane's face flushed, but whether from embarrassment or anger was hard to tell. "I'm not going to argue with you," she said, her voice rising slightly. "If you don't leave voluntarily, I'll have security escort you out." "That won't be necessary," a new voice interjected. A man in his 60s, well-dressed in a blazer and slacks, had risen from a nearby table. I couldn't help but overhear. "This gentleman has a reservation. Why are you treating him this way? This is none of your concern," Diane snapped, but her confidence wavered slightly. The man who had spoken was clearly a regular customer, someone whose opinion mattered. "It is my concern when I'm witnessing discrimination in a place I've been patronizing for years," the man replied firmly. He turned to Lawrence. "I apologize for what's happening here. This is disgraceful." Other diners were watching now, some openly staring. A young woman at a corner table had her phone out, pointed in their direction. In today's world, every confrontation is potentially public, every injustice just one video away from viral status. Diane's jaw tightened. She was clearly weighing her options, calculating how to regain control of the situation. "Mark, I appreciate your concern, but I know how to manage my restaurant." "It's not your restaurant, Diane," Mark replied coolly. "It's James Sullivan's restaurant, and I have a feeling he wouldn't approve of how you're handling this situation." For a moment, Diane looked genuinely uncertain. Then her expression hardened again, and she turned to signal someone near the entrance. A security guard, a young man in his 20s with an apologetic expression, approached reluctantly. "Please escort this gentleman out," Diane instructed. "He's trespassing." Lawrence felt his heart sink. This evening, which was supposed to be about honoring Eleanor's memory, had turned into yet another reminder of how far society still had to go. But as he prepared to leave with dignity and tact, his eyes drifted past Diane, past the security guard, past all the watching faces, and landed on the Steinway in the corner. That piano, that beautiful instrument sitting there like a promise of something better. In his canvas bag, Lawrence had brought sheet music. Not because he needed it, but because holding those pages made him feel connected to who he used to be, who he still was beneath the assumptions and the judgment. An idea formed in his mind. It was bold, perhaps even foolish. But after 65 years of choosing dignity over confrontation, of walking away from countless small injustices, Lawrence suddenly felt that he was done being invisible. "Before I go," Lawrence said, his voice cutting through the tension with unexpected authority, "I have one request." Diane crossed her arms. "You're in no position to make requests. Let me play one song on that piano?" Lawrence continued, nodding toward the Steinway. "Just one. 3 minutes of your time. If after hearing it you still want me to leave, I'll go without another word." The request was so unexpected that for a moment everyone simply stared at him. Diane's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You want to play our piano?" She finally managed, her tone dripping with skepticism and amusement. "That's a $70,000 instrument. It's not a toy." "I'm aware of what it is," Lawrence said calmly. "I've played hundreds of Steinways in my lifetime. I promise you I know how to treat one with respect." Diane laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "This is ridiculous. Charles, please escort him out now." But the security guard, Charles, hadn't moved. He was looking at Lawrence with curiosity now, perhaps sensing something in the older man's bearing that didn't match his appearance. "Ma'am, if he just wants to play for a minute—" "Absolutely not." Diane cut him off, but she could feel the room shifting against her. The other diners were watching with interest now. Several had their phones out. Mark, the customer who had spoken up, was looking at Lawrence with open curiosity. "Let him play," Mark said. "What harm could it do? If he's terrible, he'll embarrass himself and leave. If he's good, we get free entertainment." Other voices murmured agreement. The energy in the room had changed. What had been a scene of discrimination was transforming into something else, a kind of collective curiosity about what might happen next. Diane looked around at the watching faces at the phones pointed in her direction, and she realized she was trapped. If she continued to refuse, it would look even worse. Her face tight with anger, she gestured sharply toward the piano. "Fine, one song, 3 minutes. Then you leave, and I don't want to hear another word about reservations or discrimination or anything else." "Are we clear, Crystal?" "Clear," Lawrence said with quiet dignity. He walked across the restaurant floor, and the crowd seemed to part before him like the Red Sea. Every eye in the room followed his progress. The young woman who had been recording the confrontation shifted her angle to capture his approach to the piano. Her finger hovered over the record button, ready to capture whatever happened next. Lawrence set his canvas bag down gently beside the piano bench and carefully removed his sheet music, though he knew he wouldn't need it. The pieces he had brought were etched into his muscle memory, into his very soul. He'd played them thousands of times in his 30 years as a professor at the Manhattan School of Music Conservatory. But the sheet music was a comfort, a connection to a life that felt increasingly distant. He sat down on the bench, adjusting it slightly. The piano was positioned so that when he played, he would be facing most of the dining room. He could see Diane standing near the hostess stand, arms crossed, a smug expression on her face, as if she was already enjoying his anticipated failure. He could see Mark, the customer, who had defended him, leaning forward in interest. He could see the security guard Charles looking uncertain and a bit guilty. And he could see dozens of other faces, some curious, some skeptical, some sympathetic. Lawrence placed his hands on the keys. They were cool to the touch, smooth and familiar. For a moment, he simply sat there, feeling the weight of the moment. Then he closed his eyes and let the outside world fall away. What happened next would be replayed millions of times online. It would be analyzed and discussed and shared until it became more than just a video, but a cultural moment. But in that instant, as Lawrence's fingers touched the keys for the first time, none of that mattered. There was only the music. He began with Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat Major Opus 9 No. 2. It's a piece that requires not just technical skill, but deep emotional understanding. The melody is hauntingly beautiful, delicate yet powerful, and in the right hands, it can break your heart and heal it in the same breath. From the very first notes, it was clear that Lawrence Bennett was no amateur. His fingers moved across the keys with the kind of fluid grace that comes only from decades of practice. Each note was perfectly placed, the dynamics carefully controlled. The soft opening measures floated through the restaurant like a gentle rain, and conversations died mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Even the waitstaff stopped in their tracks. The piece is marked with Chopin's signature ornamentation, those delicate runs and trills that can sound cluttered in inexperienced hands. But Lawrence played them with such clarity and purpose that they felt not like decoration, but like essential parts of the emotional story he was telling. His right hand sang the melody, while his left provided a rocking, supportive bass line that gave the piece its dreamlike quality. As the music unfolded, something remarkable happened in that restaurant. The space seemed to transform. The expensive decorations, the crystal chandeliers, the white tablecloths, all of it faded into the background. There was only the music, and it was speaking to something fundamental in every person present. Joy and sorrow, memory and hope, all woven together in Chopin's timeless melody. Lawrence's eyes remained closed, but tears had begun to stream down his face. He wasn't thinking about Diane or the discrimination or the humiliation of the past half hour. He was thinking about Eleanor, his wife of 37 years, who had loved this piece. He remembered playing it for her on countless evenings, watching her close her eyes and sway gently to the music. He remembered her smile, the way she would always say again, when he finished, never tiring of hearing it. The middle section of the Nocturne builds to a climactic moment, and Lawrence poured everything into it. His fingers flew across the keys with increasing passion, the notes cascading over each other in a wave of emotion. This was not just technical proficiency. This was artistry. This was a man speaking his truth through music in a way that words could never achieve. In the audience, several people were openly crying. The young woman recording the performance had tears streaming down her face, but she kept her phone steady, capturing every moment. Mark had his hand over his mouth, his eyes wide. Even Diane, still standing by the hostess stand, had gone pale, her arms dropping to her sides as the reality of her mistake began to dawn on her. Lawrence played the final phrases with tender delicacy, each note carefully placed like a precious gift. The melody climbed one last time, then descended in a series of gentle arpeggios before resolving on a soft, peaceful chord that seemed to hang in the air long after his fingers left the keys. For a long moment after the music stopped, there was absolute silence in the Sterling room. Lawrence opened his eyes, seeing the restaurant, as if for the first time. Then slowly someone began to clap. It was Mark. Within seconds, others joined in. Then everyone was standing applauding with genuine enthusiasm. The sound was thunderous, overwhelming. Lawrence stood and turned to face the audience, wiping the tears from his face. He nodded in acknowledgement, a small, dignified gesture. But before he could step away from the piano, a woman near the front of the dining room gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God," she said loudly enough for those around her to hear. "I know who you are. You're Lawrence Bennett, Professor Lawrence Bennett from the Manhattan Conservatory." The name rippled through the crowd like electricity. Several people pulled out their phones, frantically searching. One man looked up from his screen, his face shocked. "He's right," he announced to no one in particular. "Lawrence Bennett. He taught at the conservatory for 30 years. He's trained some of the most famous pianists of the last 2 decades." More phones came out. More searches. More shocked exclamations as people discovered that the man Diane Crawford had tried to throw out of the restaurant was in fact a legendary music educator. The woman who had first recognized him approached Lawrence, her eyes shining with admiration. "Professor Bennett, I saw you perform at Carnegie Hall 15 years ago. It was the Beethoven Emperor Concerto. I've never forgotten it. You were magnificent." Lawrence smiled gently. "Thank you. That's very kind." But the woman wasn't finished. She turned to face the rest of the restaurant, her voice ringing with indignation. "This man is a genius, an absolute master of his craft, and your manager tried to throw him out because of how he looks. You all saw it. You all witnessed it." The mood in the room shifted dramatically. The appreciation for Lawrence's performance transformed into anger at how he'd been treated. People turned to stare at Diane, who had gone from pale to red, her hands clenched at her sides. Mark pulled out his phone and held it up. "I recorded the whole thing. The discrimination, the performance, everything. This needs to be seen." "So did I," said the young woman who had been recording from the beginning. "I'm posting this right now." "Wait," Diane said, finally finding her voice. She took a step forward, her composure cracking. "Wait, please, let's not be hasty. Mr. Bennett, I apologize. There was clearly a misunderstanding. Please let me seat you at our best table. Dinner is on the house, of course." Lawrence looked at her for a long moment. There was no anger in his expression, no triumph. Only a deep, weary sadness. "No, thank you," he said quietly. "I don't dine where I'm not respected, where my dignity has to be earned by proving my worth through performance. I am who I am, whether I play the piano or not. Every human being deserves basic respect, regardless of their profession, their clothes, or the color of their skin." He picked up his canvas bag and his sheet music, placing them carefully back inside. "I came here tonight to remember my wife, to feel close to her again in a place we both loved. Instead, I was reminded of how far we still have to go as a society, how easily we judge, how quickly we dismiss people we think are beneath us." Lawrence walked toward the exit, and this time no one tried to stop him. The diners parted to let him through, many of them reaching out to touch his arm or murmur apologies as he passed. At the door he paused and turned back one last time. "To everyone who witnessed what happened tonight, thank you for your support. To those who remained silent, I understand. We're all navigating this world as best we can, but I would ask you to remember this moment the next time you're tempted to judge someone based on their appearance. Look deeper, listen more carefully. We're all more than what you see on the surface." With that, Lawrence Bennett walked out into the Manhattan night, leaving behind a restaurant full of people who would never forget what they had witnessed. As the door closed behind him, phones lit up all over the dining room as videos were uploaded to social media. Within minutes, those videos would begin spreading. Within hours, they would go viral. Within days, the name Lawrence Bennett would be known by millions, and the Sterling Room would find itself at the center of a national conversation about dignity discrimination and the dangerous assumptions we make about human worth. But all of that was still to come. For now, there was just Lawrence walking down the sidewalk with his canvas bag, the cool night air on his face, and the memory of music still echoing in his heart. The next morning, Lawrence woke in his modest studio apartment in Queens to the sound of his phone ringing incessantly. He'd turned it off the night before, exhausted by the emotional toll of the evening, and had slept deeply for the first time in weeks. Now, as he switched it back on, It immediately began buzzing with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, emails, all flooding in so fast that the phone seemed to vibrate continuously in his hand. At first, he thought something terrible must have happened. Then he began reading the messages. They were from former students, old colleagues, friends he hadn't spoken to in years, and many people he didn't know at all. And they were all saying variations of the same thing. "Have you seen the videos? You're viral. This is everywhere." Lawrence opened his laptop and searched for his own name. The results made his breath catch. The videos from the Sterling Room had indeed gone viral, but on a scale he couldn't have imagined. The main video posted by the young woman who had recorded the entire incident from beginning to end had 15 million views and was still climbing. It had been shared by celebrities' news outlets and advocacy organizations. The hashtag Justice for Lawrence was trending #1 on multiple platforms. But it wasn't just that one video. Multiple angles of the performance had been posted along with the confrontation that preceded it. News sites had picked up the story running headlines like "Legendary Piano Professor Humiliated at Upscale Restaurant" and "Viral Video Exposes Discrimination at Manhattan Eatery." Local news channels were running segments. National morning shows were discussing it. Lawrence sat at his small kitchen table, scrolling through hundreds of comments. Many were supportive, outraged on his behalf, praising his dignity and his incredible performance. But seeing his private moment of pain turned into public consumption felt strange and uncomfortable. This wasn't why he had played that night. He hadn't been trying to make a statement or start a movement. He'd just wanted to be seen, to be heard, to prove that he was worthy of basic human respect. His phone rang again. This time, he recognized the number. It was Richard Chen, his former department chair at the Manhattan Conservatory, someone he hadn't spoken to since his retirement 5 years ago. Lawrence Richard's voice was warm but tinged with concern. "I've been trying to reach you all morning. Have you seen what's happening online? I'm looking at it now," Lawrence replied. "I can barely believe it. Lawrence, this is huge. The whole music community is rallying behind you. But it's bigger than that. This has become a national story. CNN wants to interview you. So does NPR, the New York Times, and about a dozen other outlets. Your phone must be exploding. It is Lawrence confirmed. Richard, I don't know what to do with all this attention. I'm not an activist. I'm just a retired teacher who wanted to have dinner." "I know," Richard said, gently. "But sometimes these moments find us whether we're looking for them or not. Lawrence people are inspired by you. By your grace under pressure, by your dignity, by your talent. You've reminded the world of something important." They talked for a few more minutes before Lawrence promised to think about doing some interviews. As he ended the call, his phone immediately rang again. This time it was a number he didn't recognize, but the area code was local. "Mr. Bennett." The voice on the other end was male, formal, and slightly nervous. "My name is James Sullivan. I own the Sterling Room. I wonder if you might have a few minutes to speak with me." Lawrence felt his stomach tighten. "Mr. Sullivan, please call me James." "Mr. Bennett, I am calling to offer you my deepest, most sincere apology for what happened to you at my restaurant last night. There are no words adequate to express my shame and regret. What Ms. Crawford did was inexcusable, and I want you to know that she no longer works for the Sterling Room. I terminated her employment this morning." Lawrence was silent for a moment. "You fired her?" "Yes. Immediately. I've been traveling for business, and I only learned about the incident when my publicist called me at 4 this morning to inform me that my restaurant was trending on social media for all the wrong reasons. I watched the videos, Mr. Bennett. All of them. I saw how you were treated, and I am horrified and mortified." "I appreciate your apology," Lawrence said carefully. "But I'm not interested in vengeance, Mr. Sullivan. Ms. Crawford made a terrible mistake, but destroying her livelihood isn't going to solve the deeper problems that led to that moment. I understand your position, and it speaks to your character, James replied. But this wasn't an isolated incident. After the videos went viral, several people came forward, former employees and customers, with stories about Ms. Crawford's behavior. There was a pattern of discrimination, of treating people poorly, based on how she perceived their social status. I failed in my duty as an owner by not seeing it sooner, and for that I also apologize. Lawrence closed his eyes. Hearing that others had been mistreated made the situation even more painful. What will you do differently going forward? I'm implementing immediate changes, James said. Mandatory bias training for all staff, a new policy for handling reservations and complaints, and I'm working with community organizations to ensure this never happens again. But Mr. Bennett, there's something else I want to ask you, and please feel free to say no. I would be honored if you would return to the Sterling Room as my guest. Not for a photo opportunity or publicity, but because it's the right thing. I want the chance to show you the hospitality you should have received in the first place. I'll think about it, Lawrence said, though he couldn't imagine ever wanting to set foot in that restaurant again. I understand. There's one more thing. Would you consider playing at the restaurant, a proper concert, I mean? I would pay you, of course, whatever you think is fair, and all proceeds from that evening could go to a charity of your choice. I think it would mean something. To the community, to my staff, to everyone who has been following your story. Lawrence didn't answer right away. The idea of returning to the scene of his humiliation, even triumphantly, filled him with conflicting emotions. Let me think about that as well, he finally said. After ending the call with James Sullivan, Lawrence tried to process everything that was happening. His quiet, private life had been upended overnight. He was trending on social media, being discussed on news programs, becoming a symbol of something much larger than himself. It was overwhelming and exhausting, and he hadn't even finished his morning coffee. Over the next few days, the story continued to grow. More details emerged about Diane Crawford's history at the Sterling Room and other establishments where she had worked. The restaurant's reviews were being bombed with 1-star ratings, though others were defending James Sullivan's swift action and promise of reform. Advocacy groups were using Lawrence's story to talk about broader issues of discrimination and the need for systemic change. Lawrence himself remained largely out of the public eye, declining most interview requests. He did agree to speak with one journalist, a thoughtful woman from a major newspaper, who promised to focus on the deeper issues, rather than just the viral moment. In that interview, Lawrence spoke about his life, his career, his late wife Eleanor, and his thoughts on what had happened. I don't want to be reduced to a viral video, he told the journalist. I'm a complex human being with a full life just like everyone else. But if my experience can help people think more carefully about how they treat others, about the assumptions they make, then perhaps some good can come from it. The article was beautiful and thoughtful, and it only increased the public's affection for Lawrence. Offers began pouring in, invitations to perform, requests for interviews, opportunities to teach master classes. It was flattering, but also overwhelming for a man who had intentionally stepped back from the spotlight after his wife's death. 3 weeks after the incident, Lawrence received a call that surprised him. It was from Marcus Johnson, a pianist he had taught 15 years ago, who had gone on to significant success performing with major orchestras around the world. Marcus had seen the videos and was calling to express his support and to make a proposal. Professor Bennett, I'm planning a concert at Carnegie Hall next month to celebrate the 10th anniversary of my debut there. I want you to perform with me, a duet. We'll play something meaningful, something that showcases who you are as an artist. The world needs to see you not as a victim, but as the master musician you've always been. Lawrence was deeply moved by the offer. Carnegie Hall. He had performed there many times over the years, but it had been nearly a decade since his last appearance. The thought of returning not alone, but alongside a former student who had become a dear friend, felt right in a way he couldn't quite explain. "I would be honored," Lawrence said, his voice thick with emotion. The announcement of the Carnegie Hall performance made headlines. Tickets sold out within hours. The concert became not just a musical event, but a cultural moment, a symbol of resilience and the triumph of dignity over discrimination. But before Carnegie Hall, there was another decision Lawrence had to make. James Sullivan had continued to reach out respectfully and persistently, asking Lawrence to consider returning to the Sterling Room. The restaurant had implemented all the changes James had promised, and more. He had hired a diversity consultant, brought in new management, and established a scholarship fund in Lawrence's name to support young musicians from underserved communities. One evening, as Lawrence sat in his apartment looking at photographs of Eleanor, he made his decision. He would return to the Sterling Room, not because they deserved his forgiveness, but because Eleanor would have wanted him to choose grace over bitterness. She had always believed in the power of second chances, in the possibility of redemption. The evening of Lawrence's return to the Sterling Room was orchestrated with care and sensitivity. This wasn't a publicity stunt or a media circus. It was a private dinner with only a small group of people present. James Sullivan, some of the restaurant staff who had been kind to Lawrence during the incident, and a few supporters, including Mark, the customer, who had first spoken up in Lawrence's defense. When Lawrence walked through the doors of the Sterling Room for the second time, the atmosphere was completely different. James Sullivan himself greeted him at the entrance, shaking his hand warmly and thanking him for coming. The hostess stand had a new person behind it, a young black woman who smiled genuinely as she welcomed Lawrence. "Mr. Bennett, we're so honored to have you here," she said. "Your table is ready whenever you'd like." They had given him the best table in the house, positioned near the Steinway piano. As Lawrence sat down, he noticed that a small brass plaque had been affixed to the piano bench. It read, "The Lawrence Bennett Piano. May all who play here remember that talent and dignity transcend all boundaries." Lawrence felt tears prick his eyes. It was a beautiful gesture, thoughtful and meaningful. Throughout the dinner, staff members approached his table, some to apologize for what had happened, others simply to thank him for his grace and to tell him how much his story had impacted them. The food was excellent, as good as Lawrence remembered from years ago. But more important than the meal was the atmosphere of respect and warmth. This was how he should have been treated the first time. This was how everyone should be treated every time. After dinner, James Sullivan approached the table. "Mr. Bennett, I know this is a lot to ask, but would you consider playing for us just a short piece? There's no pressure, and I certainly understand if you'd rather not, given the circumstances of your last performance here." Lawrence looked at the piano at the plaque bearing his name and felt something shift inside him. "I'll play," he said. "But not for you, James. Not for this restaurant. I'll play for everyone who has ever been made to feel less than, who has ever been judged unfairly, who has ever had to prove their worth just to be treated with basic human dignity." He walked to the piano and sat down, his fingers resting on the keys. This time, he chose something different. Not Chopin, but a piece by William Grant. Still one of the first major black composers in American classical music. The piece was called Summerland, and it was filled with hope and beauty and the promise of better days. As Lawrence played, he thought about his journey, from a young boy in Mississippi who learned piano in a church basement to a professor shaping young minds at one of the world's premier conservatories to this moment, playing in a restaurant that had once rejected him, but now honored him. Life was strange and unpredictable, full of pain and joy, often intertwined so closely you couldn't separate them. When he finished, the small gathering applauded warmly. But Lawrence knew this wasn't about applause. It was about reclaiming a space that had tried to diminish him, about transforming a place of humiliation into a place of healing. The Carnegie Hall concert a few weeks later was everything Lawrence could have hoped for. He and Marcus Johnson played together beautifully, their musical conversation flowing with the ease of old friends and the respect of colleagues. The audience gave them a standing ovation that lasted nearly 10 minutes. But for Lawrence, the most meaningful moment came when he looked out into the crowd and saw familiar faces, former students, old colleagues, and new friends he had made through this unexpected journey. In the months that followed, Lawrence's life found a new rhythm. He began teaching again, taking on a few private students and leading occasional master classes. He performed periodically, always carefully choosing venues and pieces that felt meaningful. The scholarship fund established in his name helped dozens of young musicians pursue their dreams. But perhaps most importantly, Lawrence became a voice for dignity and respect. He spoke at conferences, wrote thoughtful essays, and worked with organizations fighting discrimination. He used his platform not to seek revenge or to dwell on what had happened to him, but to push for positive change. Diane Crawford, the former manager who had discriminated against him, reached out through an intermediary about a year after the incident. She had been through extensive personal reflection and therapy, confronting her own biases and prejudices. She wanted to apologize directly to Lawrence if he was willing to hear it. Lawrence agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a small coffee shop far from the Sterling Room. Diane looked different, less polished, and put together more vulnerable and human. She apologized sincerely without excuses or justifications. She acknowledged the harm she had caused, not just to Lawrence but to others. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that what happened that night changed me. I've had to confront some ugly truths about myself, about how I saw the world and other people. I'm working to be better, to do better." Lawrence listened quietly, then nodded. "I believe in the possibility of growth and change," he said. "What you did was wrong, and it hurt me deeply. But I also believe that people can learn from their mistakes if they're willing to do the hard work. I hope you continue on that path." They didn't become friends. Some wounds run too deep for that. But there was a sense of closure in that conversation, a sense that while the past couldn't be erased, the future didn't have to be defined by it. 2 years after the incident at the Sterling Room, Lawrence stood once again at the entrance of the restaurant. This time he wasn't there for dinner. He was there for the dedication of the Lawrence Bennett Scholarship Hall, a new event space the restaurant had built specifically to host free concerts and educational programs for young musicians. The space featured a brand new Steinway grand piano donated by the company itself after hearing Lawrence's story. The dedication ceremony was attended by dozens of people, musicians, educators, community leaders, and many of the young scholarship recipients who would benefit from the program. James Sullivan gave a speech about the importance of using privilege and resources to create positive change. Marcus Johnson performed a short piece. And then it was Lawrence's turn to speak. He stood at the podium looking out at the assembled crowd and felt the weight of the moment. 2 years ago, I walked into this restaurant, expecting a simple dinner, he began. Instead, I experienced something painful and humiliating. But what happened next showed me something I had almost forgotten, that there are more good people than bad in this world. That when we stand up for what's right, when we refuse to accept discrimination and prejudice, we can create real change. He paused, gathering his thoughts. This scholarship hall isn't about me. It's about the young musicians who will perform here, who will learn and grow and share their gifts with the world. It's about creating spaces where everyone is welcomed and valued, regardless of their background or appearance. It's about the music, yes, but also about the dignity and respect that every human being deserves. After the speeches, Lawrence played again this time, a piece he had composed himself, inspired by everything that had happened. He called it Resilience, and it captured the journey from pain to healing, from humiliation to triumph, from despair to hope. As the final notes faded, Lawrence looked around the room at the faces watching him. He saw young musicians of every race and background, their eyes shining with inspiration. He saw community members who had supported him throughout this journey. He saw James Sullivan, who had worked hard to transform his restaurant into something better. And in his heart, he felt Eleanor's presence, as he always did when he played. The journey from that painful evening to this moment of celebration had been long and often difficult. But it had also been transformative, not just for Lawrence, but for everyone whose life had been touched by his story. What began as one man's experience of discrimination had sparked conversations about systemic change, about the assumptions we make, about the importance of treating every person with dignity and respect. Lawrence Bennett never set out to be a symbol or a spokesperson. He was just a man who wanted to have dinner, who refused to be defined by someone else's prejudice, and who found the courage to make his voice heard through the universal language of music. But in doing so, he reminded the world of something essential, that beneath all our surface differences, we are all deserving of respect, all capable of creating beauty, all worthy of being seen and heard. Years later, when asked about that night at the Sterling Room, Lawrence would smile gently and say, "It wasn't the worst thing that ever happened to me, and it certainly wasn't the best. But it was a moment of truth, both painful and powerful. And I'm grateful that it led to something meaningful, something that might make the world just a little bit better for those who come after me." The Lawrence Bennett Scholarship Hall continues to host concerts and educational programs. Hundreds of young musicians have benefited from the scholarship fund. The Sterling Room has become a model for how businesses can address and correct discriminatory practices. And Lawrence himself continues to teach, to perform, and to advocate for a world where everyone is judged by the content of their character and the quality of their contributions, not by the color of their skin or the clothes they wear. On quiet evenings, Lawrence still sits at his piano in his modest Queens apartment, playing for no audience but himself and the memory of Eleanor. Sometimes he plays the pieces that made him famous, the videos that went viral, the performances that changed his life. But more often he plays simple melodies, the kind that bring him peace and remind him of why he fell in love with music in the first place. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's always been about for Lawrence Bennett. Not the fame or the recognition or even the justice, but the pure, transcendent power of music to speak truths that words cannot express, to build bridges where walls once stood, and to remind us all of our shared humanity. And that, perhaps, is the most important lesson of all.